Hi, this is Kevin McLaughlin from the Acme team, and in this podcast, I'd like to discuss how to blueprint your program. And by the end of this podcast, you'll be able to construct a blueprint for your program that ensures congruence between the identified learning needs and your learning objectives, learning experiences, and assessment of learning outcomes. Learning objectives, learning experiences, and assessment of learning outcomes are considered the three pillars of any medical education program, and each of these is required for all areas of learning content included within your program. Before blueprinting your program, a needs assessment is required to identify your learning content. So if I haven't yet identified your learning content, then this might be a good time to review the podcast from phase 1 of the tool entitled How to Know What Learners Need to Know. If you already have your learning content, then blueprinting can help you decide on which content areas to focus your objectives, learning experiences, and assessment. In this 12 tips paper, the authors describe the steps involved in creating and using a blueprint, and to illustrate this, they described how they blueprinted their undergraduate renal course. Because their audience is first-year medical students with minimal content expertise, the authors decided to perform a perceived needs assessment, and their teaching faculty helped create a list of relevant clinical presentations for their course. They decided upon a list of 18 clinical presentations seen by nephrologists and urologists. They then moved on to weighting the clinical presentations within their program so that they could determine, for example, how much teaching and assessment time should be devoted to hyperkalemia versus polyuria. And to generate this weight, they asked their faculty to rate on a Likert scale the clinical impact or urgency of each clinical presentation, in addition to the frequency with which they encountered this presentation in their clinical practice. And for each presentation, they now generated a relative weight using the product of clinical impact and frequency scores. And as you can see, their faculty assigned more weight to presentations like hyperkalemia, acute kidney injury, and hypertension as compared to polyuria. This weight was then used to inform the learning objectives, learning experiences, and assessment of learning outcomes for each presentation, with more objectives, teaching, and assessment devoted to hyperkalemia as compared to polyuria. The authors shared a blueprint with the students so the students could also align their studying with the weighting assigned to each content area and appreciate that, in the opinion of their teachers, it is more important at their stage of training that they can describe how to treat hyperkalemia versus investigate the cause of polyuria. But what if you were presented with a different task? How would you use a blueprint if you were asked to introduce a new clinical skills program that runs throughout clerkship with the goal of improving students' performance on the entrustable professional activities for graduating medical students? You start with the needs assessment for this program, and an expressed need from graduating students was to have more opportunity to perform procedural skills. On the list of procedural skills, both graduating students and clerkship teachers ranked knee arthrocentesis above any other procedural skill and commented that this was both relevant and attainable for clerks. So based upon your blueprint, knee arthrocentesis should be part of your new program, and you can now move on to your learning objectives and declare that by the end of clerkship, the medical student will be able to successfully perform knee arthrocentesis on a real or simulated patient, including preparation, anesthesia, aspiration, analysis, and post-procedure management. Guided by this learning objective, you can create learning experiences to match this, such as a podcast reviewing knee anatomy and important landmarks, along with a video demonstrating the 5 steps in arthrocentesis to prepare students for their in-class training session, where you will first demonstrate the technique on a task trainer, after which you will observe the students performing this procedure and provide feedback. You can then give the students the opportunity to practice this procedure on a task trainer until they feel that they have mastered this technique. Finally, at the end of clerkship, the OSCE will include at least one procedural skill station where the students may be expected to perform the 5 steps of knee arthrocentesis on a task trainer. The advantage of creating a blueprint for your program at the start is that you can demonstrate validity of content such that the content that is needed matches the content that is taught and then assessed. So hopefully you can now construct a blueprint for your program where you can include and rank content based upon identified learning needs, and then use this to guide your learning objectives, learning experiences, and assessment of learning outcomes. Thanks for viewing this podcast. I hope you found it helpful, and please reach out if you have any questions or suggestions on how to improve the Acme tool.